All right, guys, welcome to the podcast today. It's an awesome day. We have somebody on the show who, when I invited her on the show, I didn't realize the credentials she actually had. I've seen some of her work. She transformed one of our staff members, like effortlessly, someone who had struggled with her weight a little bit, and she followed this individual's program, and it was pretty amazing. She was really happy that she wasn't starving, that she wasn't doing the usual things. Today we have on a clinical nutritionist. Her name is Trisha Williamson, and I'm going to just read off some of the credentials she has. She has a master's degree, Master's of Science in Applied Clinical Nutrition, a Bachelor's of Science in Biology and Exercise Science, Associates of Business Administration. She has a CrossFit Level 1 certification and a Precision Nutrition Level 1 certification, which I don't know what that is, but we're going to find that out today. Her company name is Fully Nourished with Trisha. FNT, and she does some great work. So I think everyone's going to get ready. Hopefully everybody gets ready to lose weight, feel stronger, everything else, because not only does she know nutrition, but she lives it, and she also knows exercise. I can say that. I've seen her work out, and it's pretty impressive. So she's got a lot going on, and I'm thrilled she accepted to come on the podcast today. How are you, Trisha?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm going to go over a couple of things going on in this country right now to give people even more understanding of how important nutrition is. I looked up some basic stuff just to be a little more current. The current U.S. population, the obesity rate is 40% now. In the U.S. population, 34 million diabetics. 95% of them are type 2, which is the diet. It has a much stronger dietary relationship. Diabetics are more commonly male than female. 95% of diabetics, the type 2, it is from diet and inactivity, two areas that you have expertise in. One half the population of the U.S. has heart disease. 523 million people died of heart disease in 2019 in this country. That's 16% of the deaths, of the total deaths, were from heart disease. The cause of heart disease is diabetes, obesity, and then diet in that order. And as you know, diabetes and obesity are diet, right? So pretty crazy. Cancer has links to diet. I think there's a lot of cancers that a lot of foods that prevent cancer. They don't like to say openly that cancer can be treated by food because it's such a serious condition and we have such a medically dominated society that tends to be more their area. But there's a lot of foods that are associated with causing cancer, and those are processed meats. Hot dogs, salami. I think that's a lot of common sense. Beef, pork, veal, and lamb are all associated with higher rates of cancer. Fruits, vegetables, and sleep improve your immune system, which a lot of people are finding out and will find out soon as they study and understand the immune system more because of the current situation, that it's one of the great ways of dealing with making the immune system stronger so your immune system fights cancer. I think everybody should look up how the immune system deals with cancer. I learned that back in the AIDS epidemic, that a lot of poor individuals that contracted AIDS were actually dying of cancer and pneumonias and other conditions, but that the immune system was so attacked by AIDS that the result was a series of cancers that killed some people actually very, very close to me back in the 80s. But let's start out. Trisha, tell me, what got you started in this? Everyone kind of has a little bit of a story. People know my story with the migraine headaches. What is your story? Why did you get into this?
So it's actually a pretty long story, I think, but it pretty much started my whole life. I always have been into nutrition, health and wellness, exercising. My whole family, we always would exercise and, we tried to eat well. So I always there was always that interest to me. And then there was a whole nother factor. My whole life, I always had gut issues, I'll say. The only one in my family that was like super sensitive to certain foods. I had to get stomach aches. I had to stay away from certain things. And it was always really frustrating. And I just, and I never could figure out exactly what was causing that. And I would say that there was a time where I had excruciating stomach pain, and I went to my pediatrician at the time. I think I was 20, but I still went to my pediatrician. But I went to my pediatrician because I was like, what's going on? And she thought I might have to go to the hospital because she thought maybe that my appendix was burst. And so, my mom took me to the hospital. They ran all these tests and couldn't find out a single thing. And over hours, the pain started to go away, but I still was like, well, I don't ever want to feel like that again. And there was another situation where I had, stomach pain, not as bad like that was, but it was still there. And I was like, well, something's causing this. And there wasn't any food that I was eating consistently. There was no pattern to it. So, they booked me all these appointments with different doctors and ran more tests, and no one could ever figure anything out. So they wanted to run even more tests. And at that point I was just like, I need a break from this. Like I need to figure this out. And at that point, and they diagnosed me with IBS, which is pretty much a lot of people get diagnosed with that if they can't really, figure out what exactly is wrong with you. So, that was 10 years ago. So I just was like, all right, well, I'm going to look into this more and I'm going to figure out how I can make myself feel better. And I just started reading more articles and listening to podcasts just about whole foods and how they help the body, how they heal the body. And I just became so passionate about it. And it was like, I was so intrigued. And then I also was into CrossFit at that time. I found CrossFit with my mom I was like 16, I think, 17 years old. And, everybody talks about paleo and the zone diet and CrossFit, and they were just talking about nutrition a lot. And, it was another thing. I wasn't ever really like overweight, but I definitely had a good, probably like 20 pounds to lose. And so I was always interested too in how to heal my gut and make myself feel better, but also lose weight. So I picked up the book, The Paleo Solution by Rob Wolf, and I just was like so interested in everything he had to say. And I read the whole book cover to cover, which is actually a huge deal for me because I'm not a big reader. I try really hard to be a reader, but I'd rather like listen to a book and do something. It's really hard for me to sit still. But I read it and I was just, and it wasn't just about paleo. It was about like how each macronutrient works and how it fuels the body. And he talked a lot about what foods can do for the body. And I just became obsessed. And I actually decided to go back to school for nutrition. And then that's because I already had my business degree. I just graduated with my business degree. At that point, I just got my associates, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. It was more so my whole life, I always was like, I'm going to own a business. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew I wanted to own a business. So I got that degree. And then it was right after that, I read that book and I was like, you know what, this is what I want to do. I want to help other people feel better. I want to figure out how, I can help people lose weight, keep it off, help with their, relationship with food and everything like that. So I went on to Buff State and got my degree there and then got my master's in clinical nutrition through the chiropractic college. So yeah,
That's
long story,
great.
but that's kind of how I got there.
That's a good, I think that's a good summary of a story. I mean, most people have a sort of a calling to a profession, I think. I was, one of Chris Rock's jokes is there's jobs and there's professions, and a job is something you have to go to, and a profession is something you get to go to. It's a different kind of feeling when you're what you do for a living is something that you do even off camera, off work. I know you and a lot of people friends we have in common, pretty much they have a job, but they also it's a career and it's involved in their personal life. I could have any of my patients that I give advice to follow me through the supermarket, come into my workout area and see that I practice what I preach. I couldn't live any other way. Hypocrisy drives me nuts. That's why, politics drives me insane. So for me, I think a lot of people do have, when they have undiagnosable conditions or conditions that aren't yet given that watertight container of diagnosis, and they have to suffer with, sometimes we call them junk diagnoses. A lot of times, irritable bowel syndrome is the best they have. So I'm not saying that doesn't exist. It exists. It's a name for something that has certain characteristics, but it's not good enough if the only answer is a drug. I mean, let's keep looking. Let's subdivide this condition into 4 other ones. You think about something horrifying like cancer. There's how many different types of cancer, how many different ways of getting it, right? So it really shouldn't be called, that's really kind of a giant term. By no means is that a junk diagnosis, but it is a big term that covers a lot of different caveats of that same disease. But I think most of the more passionate people I know that are in this field have suffered and have been misdiagnosed or just tossed around, or there's been hopelessness. For other people listening to these podcasts, you've heard me say that, my neurologist when I was 12 years old told me I was cursed. And I thought, well, I guess I'll get some Eye of Newt. Where's the cauldron? I mean, how am I going to break the curse? There's there frogs involved, toads, it just is ridiculous. But kind of healing is kind of out of ideas. You just sort of blamed it on genetics or maybe environment. I don't even know. But I left there really disappointed, suffered for a few more years, and then found my answer through really my own digging around, just kind of what you did. And I understand, to get back to it, did your father have a gym? Did I hear that right?
My mom does.
Your mom owns a gym? Oh, that's fantastic.
Yep, Fairport.
Yeah, that's fantastic. How would you define your system? You mentioned CrossFit as your workout style. Paleo is something you have a lot of respect for, as do I. And I'm curious, is there a way of defining your system?
So you mean like how everything works? What I kind of prescribe to people?
Like there's the zone diet that has a name. The paleo has a name.
Yeah.
Does yours have a name?
I have 2 different services, and one is called the Whole Foods approach. So I guess I would say I'm pretty much like team Whole Foods. I think paleo is great, but it also, there's a time and a place for it. Even the zone diet and everything like that. And with my plan and, what I give people, I like it to be as realistic as possible. So, paleo might not be super realistic for somebody long term. They may want to eat rice again. They may need those extra carbs for what they're doing. And what happens with a lot of these diets is people get so deprived of certain foods, and then they fall off the wagon, and it's just like this vicious cycle that they can't break. So my approach is definitely like whole foods, like emphasis in whole foods and why they're important and why they're going to help make you feel good. But I also am huge on having the things that, maybe labeled treats, or maybe some people in their head label them bad food. But those you should have those in moderation, because you do have to live your life. And it's just a way of learning how to do both without going through this vicious cycle. I mean, there's so many people out there who have gained and lost the same 50 pounds, or 20 pounds over and over and over again. And it's my biggest, I always tell my clients, if the one thing you take away from working with me is your change in food behavior, and sustainable weight loss, then I've done my job. So that's kind of like Whole Foods is really important for me to make sure that people understand what are Whole Foods, what they can do for you, and how they can make you feel. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's almost a similar journey that I had. The first thing when I heard the paleo diet years ago, I thought, here comes another crazy fad diet. Then I read about it and I thought, okay, wow, it's actually paying respect to the ancient diet, and as best we could figure it out from maybe anthropologists. And that is something that I've been preaching for a long time. I just didn't realize how much was known about diet that long ago. And then I realized that some of the stuff on the paleo diet I didn't always agree with. Some of that heavy reliance on red meat, maybe, or depending, there's versions of the paleo. Don't have anybody get upset out there. There's different versions of the paleo, but the one I was doing had a fair amount of red meat in it. And I'm a type A blood, and there's some evidence that we don't digest red meat as well as vegetables. And before you knew it, I just tweaked it a little bit, and I was eating more and more whole foods, to the point where I was doing like a whole food, somewhat vegetable-based paleo, and all the while I felt great through all these transitions. But what made more sense from a health standpoint, nutrition standpoint, was to get back to vegetables. That's the top of the list, right? I mean, that's some of the big things. And then obviously your protein needs and your carbohydrate needs, like you're mentioning, as the athlete that you are, I mean, without the right carbohydrates, you're just going to pass out during the workout. So you have to be able to, manage those, which I know you do. One of the things that I'd heard you mention in the past was macros. Maybe tell us real briefly what that means when you say a macros diet, or what are macros?
Yeah. So, so I do the whole foods approach, and then I have my macro coaching too. And with each program that I do, everything's personalized. So, that's definitely huge, because I don't ever hand anybody like a set diet plan. Like, I never am like, here's what you're going to eat for the next month. We actually do it together, and that goes for macros too. So, so with the macros, it's obviously more so for people that are experienced more with how to count their macros. And when people do the whole foods approach with me, we do transition over that eventually, and I help teach them, and they'll learn from me and how to do it. Macro sounds really intimidating to a lot of people. And like everyone's immediate reaction to me is like, I'm not doing that. I'm like, I mean, have you not counted? Have you not like weighed and measured your food for this whole time? It's basically the same thing with macros. Now you're just kind of dialing it in a little bit more. You got to put it into an app and count things up. But at the end of the day, it seems very intimidating, but it's not all that difficult. It just looks intimidating. But basically with counting macros, your macronutrients, we're counting proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. And I do a percentage of both based on the calories that client should be taken in. And it's different for everybody. So, I might have some people have a higher fat percentage. I might have some high intense athletes have a lower fat percentage, but a very high carbohydrate percentage. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's great, because everyone knows that there are people, even within the same family, that eat the same exact diet as each other. Like the mom puts food on the table, and one child is 40 pounds overweight, and the other person, has a 3% body fat, and they appear to be eating the same foods and maybe even having similar, physical activity. And that's frustrating for a lot of people. So I like the idea that you're personalizing that approach. It isn't just here's the nutrition plan that fits everybody, because I know I'm very select, and what has me perform and underperform, overperform, gain weight, lose weight. And I figured that out kind of the hard way. I didn't have anybody like you to be able to dial it in really well. So that's important. One of the questions that always comes up, and I learned this the hard way as well, is what's more important for weight loss, diet or exercise? I mean, how do you dial those up? If you're going to do the macros and get that right, how do you get like, okay, you're going to do this much physical activity at this heart rate, and you're going to eat this many calories?
So it depends on the person. If like someone came to me and they were like, haven't done anything, then again, it really depends. I'd have to talk to them, but like, number one, they shouldn't try to do both at once, because when you try to take on too much at once, sometimes we end up failing because it just feels so overwhelming. Be like, I got to get my workouts in. I got to get my nutrition, spot on, versus like mastering one or the other. You're still going to see an improvement in your health with either one. So I always recommend taking it slowly. If someone tells me they're really ready to do their nutrition and make changes there, then we'll start with that. And then maybe in like a few weeks, we'll get them to the gym, or maybe even that first week with nutrition, I'll be like, okay, go for a walk 2 times this week, 20 minutes, or ride the bike for 30 minutes, one day this week, any movement that we can get. But if someone already is kind of okay with food and they really need some motivation to get out of the house and they need to get some activity in, then I would recommend they start with exercise first. So it really just depends on the person and where to start. But obviously both are beneficial. There's a lot of people that do exercise and have a really hard time losing weight, and that could absolutely have to do with diet though too. So I would say exercise is very important, but people don't realize how important what you're putting into your body is too. So
yeah, the way for me personally, what I figured out was that I have a big appetite. I love eating a lot of food. I was raised that way. And I realized that if I ate everything I wanted, there was no workout that could burn that off. I mean, it was
Mhm.
almost impossible. I'd have to be literally in the Olympic training program to burn the calories that I'm very easily capable of eating. But when I improved the nutritional quality of my food, went whole food, did more paleo style, I could still eat a fair amount of food, not that disgusting amount that I'm referring to, but a fair amount of food. In other words, be full, be happy and full.
Yeah.
And the workouts made sense. The workouts didn't have to be crazy to keep the weight exactly where I wanted to be and keep the muscle mass where I wanted to be. So for
Yeah.
me, it was eating healthier. And it's, I've always been, I'm like you said, you can't sit still to read a book sometimes. I'm a lot like that as well. I've always just forced myself to sit still. That's how I made it through, 8 years of college.
Yeah.
But now with YouTube, I put on some of the most amazing videos while I'm working out. So I'm
Mhm.
learning and working out at the same time. And that works for me. But that leads us to the next question. What I wanted to know is, how do you approach the couch potato? You kind of answered that a second ago,
Yeah.
but maybe sum up on, person comes to you, they've been living an unhealthy lifestyle. They're 50 pounds overweight. Let's take an example, somebody like that. They just
Mhm.
quit smoking. So they're on the road. Maybe they had a health scare.
Mhm.
How do you ramp them up to superhuman?
So I would definitely, I would start with very small changes,
Hmm.
especially if they've done nothing. And again, if they came to me for help, then I would assume like they're ready to dial in their nutrition. So I'd probably start with that. And maybe there's someone that drinks soda every day, and they have, and I come across this client every once in a while where they love their soda and they have it every single day, like 3 to 4 glasses a day.
Hmm.
And what everyone wants to do at first is like cut it out completely. And that can really set you up for, I don't want to say failure, but sometimes it doesn't work out because you're
Yeah.
depriving yourself of it. And then there may be that day that comes along where you have one. And then you think, oh, well, I had one. I might as well just like ruin the whole day and have more. So I would start smaller and say, okay, you're having 4 glasses a day. Let's have 2 glasses a day. And even like psychologically in their head, they're like, oh, I can still have soda. Okay. And eventually it does over time, like lead to less and less of them drinking that because they realize that they feel better without it. They realize that the number on the scale is going down. And maybe they're not like they still aren't set on quitting it, but I might be like, okay, don't have a soda on this 2 days a week, and see how you feel. So very small changes. And then again, so things like that. And I would absolutely write out a personalized meal plan with them, but we would make it based off of foods that they actually like. Obviously, I do make sure that they're getting their veggies and their fruits in, balanced meals and all that. But, if they come to me and they're like, well, I really love, I don't know, like chicken Caesar salads or something from Wegmans,
Hmm.
which is not a terrible option, but I think we can do better. I might give them suggestions on what they can buy to make their own, and just like change meals that they actually like into healthier versions. And then with activity, like I was saying, I'd probably be like, you know what, you're not ready to go to a gym yet. Let's, ride the bike for 20 minutes and watch Netflix while you ride the bike. It doesn't have to be
Hmm.
anything intense. Just movement is so important. And just to start moving is like the very first step. So they can ride the bike if they can go outside and go for a walk. I think a lot of people think that they need to like go to a gym and like do, all these intense challenges. And it's
Hmm.
like, no, just start small because you'll see over time that, the weight will start to come off. You'll start to feel better and you'll be more motivated to keep going with it.
Yeah. One of the things I always tell people, for your mental health, physical activity is extremely important.
Yep.
For your diet, it's also important for your mental health because obviously roller coaster rides with sugars, refined sugars are terrible. But
Mhm.
I want people to exercise so they have the energy to overcome the challenges of the food temptations. I know
Yes.
when people are sad and depressed, they turn to food to change their state, right? They might say,
Mhm.
okay, that feels good. That makes me stop thinking about that sad thought or that anxiety issue that I have. And that might be usually those are foods that are almost drug-like, right? Refined sugars, for example. You go have a cheeseburger. I mean, it's basically a drug at that point by the time you eat
Mhm.
that thing. And, you're going to end up having physiological shifts that are going to make you feel like something different, which is better than what you felt, and that whole psychology behind food. And if you're exercising, in my opinion, you then have the energy and positivity to overcome that, right? You get a little excited about things, and you can say, I'm not going to do that, but I will have my cheat day, or I will have my not so healthy food on Tuesday. I'm not having it today. Today's going to be, a really good day. So yeah, I asked you that because, I have a lot of people that, have, would sometimes think when they meet somebody like you in shape and so together, they might think, well, she won't work with me. I'm terrible. And that's such a sad thing, because everyone I know that's at your level of health doesn't feel that way. We love taking people that are completely dilapidated and notching them up. You take somebody who's sad and obese and everything's wrong, and you get them to feel a little bit better. It's exciting for me. I mean, it's actually easier, I think, than taking a superhuman and making them one notch more super. Yeah, I think it's easier to take someone at the very bottom and see the changes and watch the excitement in their face and change their life. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, because it's so new to them, and like sometimes I'm just like, at the end of the day, I'm like, I love my job, because it's such a nice feeling to see them like make those shifts, and for them to realize like, oh, I actually can feel better than this. I just have to do these little changes. So it's a good thing.
To think that when you realize that you have control over your health, I think that's a very exciting thing, because so many people bought into the genetic model that, okay, this is how it is. This is all I'm capable of. And I've tried and I've failed, and I've tried and I've failed, and now I'm even heavier, or now I'm even more depressed, or now I'm even weaker. And they just need somebody organized that has a time-tested, proven plan, like your program, to get them to the next place. And I think it's an exciting, encouraging thing to be a part of. Another challenging individual that I have many of, and I really feel for this group, are postmenopausal women. When you try to study hormones and the effects on the body, it's pretty dramatic. And I have a lot of women in my practice that have gotten to the point where they've gained weight, and they're really trying pretty hard to get it right. Any secrets, any ideas for that group that you could think of that might help them?
Just that they need to eat. That's like the biggest thing with that group, is that they think they need to eat less. And their body's been through so much stress. The hormones have totally changed. And they just keep digging themselves a deeper hole. And what people don't realize, like when you're cutting your calories, that puts your body in a state of stress. You're not giving it the right amount of fuel. So if you put that stressor on top of all the other stressors going on, it's not going to help your hormones. And I know that's not the answer any woman of that age wants to hear, because, it's frustrating. And I've dealt with a lot of postmenopausal women, and I know they're frustrated. But at the end of the day, it's a patient phase that they kind of have to go through, and properly fuel the body to get it out of that state of stress and let their hormones balance again. And it could take 6 months to a year, but as long as they're properly fueling, they could get to the point that they want to get to, and maybe get to that comfortable weight that they want. And also, depends what else is going on. But it's definitely a frustrating stage in life. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not looking forward to that for myself someday.
Well, the odd thing I find is that we learn so much from animal studies, and most animals don't live beyond the reproductive years. And so we don't really have a lot of ability to go that route with changing hormones, whether they be, different things like ashwagandha and some of the herbal products that are designed to be, phytoestrogens and adaptogens, as they call them, which I tell everybody they should look up, because it's a pretty exciting world for men and for women to balance hormones out. So that's good.
I was just saying, ashwagandha is a great supplement, magnesium, and also just making sure that they're getting in enough protein too. That's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very true. When people try to eat healthier, sometimes they cut out so much meat, and then they don't replace it with proper vegetable proteins. and maybe small amounts of meat, and they end up with a detriment, and obviously that's not gonna help anybody, including women that have more sensitivity to their metabolism as their thyroid gets challenged and everything else as time goes by. That's great. Give us 3 things to get people started. If you had to give people like 3 quick ideas to get them on the road to a better body composition, let's say, what would your top 3 be?
I would tell them to start weighing and measuring their food. So get a food scale. And I would tell them to 3 things that they need or 3 things that they can do. Is it
3 things they can do that pretty easy, let's say. So someone's listening to this podcast and they think, okay, I want to get started. Where do I even start? What can I do just on my own? Say they want to contact you, but they want to first get a little bit started.
Yeah. So definitely get a food scale, weigh and measure, start tracking everything. So I love the app MyFitnessPal because it's very easy, straightforward. You can track calories, macros, all in that. Any client that works with me, I always ask for a food journal and for them to have MyFitnessPal. So that would definitely be something they should get. And also just to move, like just to start moving whatever way it may be. I know I already said like twice that ride your bike or go for a walk, but yeah, I would just start to move. Write everything down that you're eating or track it in MyFitnessPal and start weighing and measuring everything. I think those are definitely 3 important things that they can do to just jumpstart things.
Yeah. So. I like the scientific approach like that because a lot of people are guessing at what they're eating, and there's no real measurement based on their body size and their caloric, what their metabolism might be like at different stages of their game or how much muscle mass they're carrying. So, I think that's very good. What would you say 3 absolutely no-go nutritional strategies, failed ones, bad ideas? What would be 3 that you think people do a fair amount of and they're absolutely just pedaling backwards on it?
It depends, and I don't want to say anything without offending anybody, or getting anyone upset. But definitely just in general, I think a lot of people just think they need to like kind of starve themselves. Like they'll have a weekend where they overdo things and like, oh, I'm going to start fresh on Monday. And then you barely eat on Monday. That's a vicious cycle that just keeps going. And it's not doing anybody any favors because you may eat barely nothing on Monday and even to Friday you were super clean. And then all of a sudden Friday night comes, you have a ton of calories and then you're in a huge surplus. Same thing with Saturday and Sunday. So I guess we can kind of call that binging and restricting. Yeah. Just breaking that cycle and just learning how to properly eat versus doing something like that. I guess any diet program that is like selling you prepared meals like shakes or anything that you could just like immediately heat up or something versus you going out and making your own food. That's something I would definitely avoid. Because again, you're not really learning how to do it on your own. And those products aren't necessarily the healthiest. I mean, they're probably full of sodium because they're, preserving them and all that. A third thing, and I won't like say anything specifically, but I guess avoid anything that that isn't realistic long term. Which I feel, yeah. So I feel like there's so many diets out there that people try to do. And then I guess I'll use keto as an example. And I'm not bashing keto because to each their own. Everyone is very different with what works for them. But I feel like a lot of clients will be like, well, people lost weight on keto. I'm going to start keto. But they don't really look into it. And it's like, if you actually do keto, you can't eat any carbs. It's 5% of your caloric intake are your carbs. And that has to come mostly from vegetables. And even that's not a whole lot of your total calories. Sure. And realistically, and then the weekend comes and someone's like, oh, do you want a beer? Do you want a drink? Or do you want a piece of cake? We're at a birthday party. And it's like, oh, wait, I can't do that. But no one thinks like, oh, maybe temporarily they'll do that. But eventually it's like, but are you going to eat drink again? Are you gonna have a drink ever again? You kind of have to like figure out, is that a good choice for me? Is this long term? Is this realistic for me to do long term? So yeah, just really thinking about all those different diets and just thinking long term. Okay, is this realistic? Does this make sense for me to do long term? What happens when I'm done losing the weight? Like, what do I do after that? So.
No, I think that's great. I mean, one of the big strategies I see is that binge type of a diet, and just something unsustainable. It's one of the biggest problems, especially when I was younger and when I was first in college and in chiropractic college. You would hear these diets that would come out, and they were kind of insane. So I'm just eating watermelon,
No,
and then and then people would lose all this weight, and it was like, oh my God, I'm gonna eat watermelon too. Before you know it, you got people just buying all the watermelon, can't even find any in the supermarket. And then, check back 6 months later, all these people have gained 20 pounds. They lost 40, gained 20, then they're miserable. And I'm like, what happened to the watermelon diet? I thought it worked. Well, I couldn't do it long term, obviously, right?
And that reminds me too of like a juice cleanse. People are like, oh, I'm going to do a juice cleanse this week, a 7-day juice cleanse. You shouldn't do anything that you're just drinking pure liquids for 7 days. I mean, you have to think of like what happens after that. And people many times just gain weight back on. So it's just really thinking like, is this realistic? Does this make sense? So
exactly. I agree with you 100%. One of the things that I get in working with patients over the years is people telling me they're too busy. And I'll give you my answer first. When someone says they're too busy to do healthy things, for example, and let's say the conversation is, this person's in trouble physically in a somewhat significant way. And they'll say, well, I'm just too busy for this. I can't do this or whatever. I'm always like, so what's got you so busy? In other words, I want to see what their priorities are. And then I say, okay, your priorities and the things you're talking about, some of them are obviously pretty valuable. One of the biggest ones, people say, well, I have to take care of my children. And obviously that strikes a massive chord in anybody, including me. I have children, right? So I understand. I'm not asking anyone to neglect their children, but what I'm asking them is, how good are you going to be at managing and taking care of your children from a hospital bed, right? I mean, I know that's kind of a big hit, but it's true. I know patients who have pressed their luck for 20, 30 years, ended up with some horrifying disease, and they're at Roswell, and they're near saying goodbye to their children at 45 years old. And what was that about, right? How much did you cater to your children that you had to eat garbage, smoke, drink, and lay around? It just doesn't hold true, right? Be an example to your children, or be example to the people you're taking care of taking care of yourself properly. So with that mouthful, what would you say you would tell people that are too busy?
So I definitely am a little blunt, and I'll say you got to make time. It is the answer. Like, everyone's busy. Everybody has stuff going on, but it's almost like trying to make room for something financially. Like, you find a way. So if you are really that busy, I'm sure there's an hour of your day, even once a week, that you could prepare meals for the whole week.
Right.
And I don't just say that and walk away. I mean, we work on where to find that time in their schedule to make it work. So whether that be taking advantage of a prepared meal service. I know I just said not to do those, but I meant like you're ordering those offline, as in like those prepared meal restaurant places around the area, like Eat Right Foods, Balanced Body. You can walk right in and they have prepared meals just stacked. And most of them are pretty balanced. Definitely have to be careful. Some of them will have macros and all of that on there, and it might be like mac and cheese and like, barbecue crispy chicken or something. So you have to be careful and choose wisely, but they do have balanced meals in there that you could pick up, 10 meals per week and have one for lunch and dinner every day. So, and also making that time, even if you have a half hour. I have plenty of meal prep tips and tricks that I let people know of, that you can get things done in 30 minutes. And, and I always tell them too, I'm like, well, like how much time do you watch Netflix? Like how much time are you on Instagram? I'm sure you have the time in your day. You just have to make it work. And I also tell people, schedule it out. Like get a planner, put it in your phone. Like at 11 o'clock on Sunday, this is when I'm making food for the week. So I have everything ready to go. Or maybe at 8 o'clock on Sunday, you're going to Wegmans to go grocery shopping, or you're hitting up one of those prepared meal places. So you have your meals for the week. So definitely ways.
That's something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is something I learned later in life to make, food and store it. I mean, I always kept my leftovers, but I never made more food than I would eat to a degree that I could part it out during the week. I like to make these vegan protein bars made of, oats and hemp protein, and they're extremely healthy. And they last over a week in the fridge. There's no animal product in them. And it's just a fantastic snack because it's kind of sweet, but it's not crazy carbohydrate, and it's loaded with fiber. I put diatomaceous earth in there. Anybody wants that recipe, I have it at the office, and we can maybe put it in this video. But I think one of the things that I also wanted to ask you is, what makes you different? You kind of answered this, but maybe just sum it up. What makes you different from Weight Watchers, for example? Weight Watchers is a big one. What makes you different than that?
It's just I'm so much more personalized for that individual. So, Weight Watchers, they get there, and nothing wrong with Weight Watchers if it works for you. I wish there was a little bit more education behind what they're giving people. But I guess that's what I do, is I really provide people with, why I'm giving you this type of food, why I'm giving you this much food. And just, we write out a whole meal plan together. And it's just personalized to that person. So they know exactly what they need to eat and of how much, versus, getting a certain amount of calories and then just kind of planning it out on their own. It's just good for, some people need ideas and they don't know where to start. I mean, they can be given calories, but it doesn't mean they know how to eat. So yeah. And like I said, like I really like to set people up for long-term sustainable results. I want them to be able to lose weight or feel better, whatever their goal may be, but I want that to last long term. And a huge thing that people don't realize is right after, they're in a huge deficit, whether it be with Weight Watchers or keto or whatever they're doing, and they lose all this weight, no one knows what to do next. And they think they kind of have to stay in that diet long term. And that's not realistic. I mean, it's never realistic to be eating in a huge deficit for a long period of time. One, it can really weigh heavy on your hormones. It lowers your metabolism. So anytime that you eat more calories than that, you easily can gain weight. Your body's going to be more sensitive. And that's why a lot of times you see people lose a lot of weight, and then like you might see them 6 months later, they gained all their weight back and then some. They didn't know how to come out of that deficit. And that's another thing that I help people do is when we're done, and I don't ever keep anybody in a deficit longer than 12 weeks. That's my max. I don't. So, and I go in phases with people. But it proves you have long-term sustainable results with that versus that fast, rapid weight loss and then just staying there forever. So we bump calories back up very slowly so we can keep that weight, the weight that was lost, so we can keep it off. And get your calories back up to maintenance calories so you're feeling good, your hormones aren't being compromised, and so you're not always feeling restricted, because that's probably the worst thing too, is restricting, and then you get back into that vicious cycle.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most powerful things you just said in this podcast for me personally, is that you have a program or a strategy or a system for getting people out of the deficit phase of their diet, because people lose the weight, and we all know this, and everyone's done it. People gain the weight back, and everybody goes, "Oh, they went off the diet," but it's not as simple as that, right? They ruined their metabolism on the diet. Then they tried to maybe come off reasonably in their mind. They didn't just go crack a keg of beer open and start eating pretzels. They basically said, I'm going to add a little more of this, and all of a sudden the scale goes up, and man, is that depressing, right? People just lose all their gas, and they're just like, boy, this didn't work. I'm born to be heavy, and I'm just going to sail it out now. Just get the lawn chair out. I'm done.
Yeah, and then they always wonder, well, I did this last time. It worked for me last time, but it's like, well, you weren't meant to do it forever, So metabolism, our bodies are really smart. I mean, they adapt to anything that you give it over and over again. So if your body, and this is extremely low, but a lot of people, females especially, they go down to 1,200 calories and then they stay there. And then all of a sudden, anytime they go and try to lose weight again, they go to 1,200 calories, but they're, that first time that they lost the weight, that was great. But now their body's like, no, like we need to go lower than that in order to lose weight. But if you go lower than 1,200 calories, you're going to be starving. Your hormones aren't going to be happy with you, and restricting, which leads to poor food behavior. So,
exactly.
And another thing that I do for people, I have a lot of females that come to me that have just done years of dieting, and we help build their calories up. It takes a little bit of talking into for them to do it, because no one wants to be patient. They want that quick fix. But I always, I tell them, like, well, you could spend the next year trying to diet over and over again, or we could spend the next year trying to repair your metabolism and getting you to a healthy point so we could cut calories again, so you can see weight loss again. So time's going to pass anyways. You just have to choose what you do with it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I have one more question for you, but first I want to tell everybody, if you like these videos, I want you to, subscribe and give them a thumbs up and share them. And also, feel free to comment. I love answering questions. I have no problem with that. Any criticisms, I can take it. I can take it. But one last thing for you, Trisha, the biggest lessons you've learned over the years. Give us one or two big lessons, maybe mistakes you've made in this area, whether it be exercise or diet, doesn't matter, that you kind of think, boy, I'm never doing that again. That burned, or that didn't work out, or I gotta be careful.
Well, probably I personally, the biggest thing for me is that just eating enough, because that was another thing I used to do. I used to be a huge binger, but I would restrict. So that's something that any recommendation for any female going through this is just to eat, give yourself some time to heal. But yeah, that's definitely something I've learned, is that your body needs fuel, and it's going to thrive off of that fuel. You just have to give it that time and be patient. The other thing too is that nutrition changes so much, and there's always new research, and it's okay to believe in something for yourself, but it may not necessarily be somebody else's cup of tea. So that's the thing that I've definitely learned, is that what I do, it may not be what everybody else is going to do. And that's okay. Everyone has, their own thing that works for them. And if they feel healthy doing those things and, doing that type of exercise or eating what they're eating, and then that's great. But yeah, it's just so everyone is so different with how they respond to nutrition. And
absolutely. And I think sometimes more than one thing will work for somebody. It's just one of them works way better and or is more tolerable, right? You talk about sustainability. Sometimes what works for me, there might be things that work better for me, but I can't sustain them. Even if they do take care of my metabolism, they do everything right. And there's stuff that works almost as good, but I can completely sustain it. Right. I mean, I don't eat gluten, and I'm really almost completely dairy free. And for a lot of people, they can never sustain that. I can sustain that because I feel it so quickly, especially dairy products. I feel them so quickly, taking my health down a couple notches, that I look at them and I associate them with not feeling good, and I can just walk away. Where gluten is a little tougher than dairy products, because, I'm a cookie and pie person. I mean, that's my weakness. That's my kryptonite, right? I don't have to eat. There's really nothing else. I could care less about ice cream. It's just strange, but I don't care. But I know. And then I found a gluten-free pie place in Lockport that's just astronomically good. And it's a mixed blessing, right? It's a lot of sugars. So with that, it's moderation, holidays, birthdays, stuff like that. We live it up with that. But certainly that's not going to become my new lifestyle of, packing it. Oh, it's gluten-free, so it's going to be fine. It's not a whole food right there. That's kind of a little caveat.
and that's important too, is a lot of people are like, oh, this is labeled vegan, this is labeled dairy-free, gluten-free. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily that healthy for you. It just means it doesn't have that ingredient in it. So, but yeah, and I'm with you too. I'm pretty much gluten-free, pretty much dairy-free, but that works for me. I feel so much better avoiding those things, but not everybody, is bothered by that. So, and that's okay. And it's different. If someone comes to me and they're like, well, I'm really not feeling good after I have this, but they're not willing to give that up. I'm like, well, you got to be a little open-minded and change some things up. But if they feel good, then, and that's what works for them, then that's what works for them.
Yeah. Well, Trisha, that's fantastic. I really enjoyed this. I think our viewers learned a lot. I think my patients are going to be thrilled with this, because it's you have a nice, concise program that's reasonable. You're a reasonable person, right? Even though you're kind of superhuman, you're still reasonable. You understand the regular folks, and you know how to work with them. And I'm sure you can work with super athletes as well. So anybody that wants to find is Trisha Williamson, and Fully Nourished with Trisha is her business, FNT. She's local, so she can meet you in person, or obviously through Zoom and everything else that I'm sure she does. So thanks everybody. Thanks Trisha for showing up and going over this with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
You got it. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye.